here.
Okay.
Oh, it's working. Okay, let's go.
Okay.
So today I'm interviewing Mary Zimmerman, who got her bachelor's degree from the University of Montana, master's degree from Walla Walla. And since then, she's worked at the Missoula Food Bank as a social worker, Winds of Change, Child and Family Services. She worked as a CPS worker and a supervisor to CPS workers for 5 years. And then she moved on to Dan Fox to work as a therapist, and she's been in private practice for a while now too, as a therapist. So what I want to ask you today is some questions that will help us understand what's going wrong with the foster care program in Montana. Montana has the second highest rate of removal to foster care in the country. And in 2017, according to recent federal statistics, 17 out of every 1,000 children in the state were in foster care, and the national average is 6. So in your opinion, why is that happening?
That's a good question. I think that's a big question. So I actually am kind of I didn't realize that those were the statistics. And so I'm a little bit surprised to hear that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at this 2 different ways. You could look at it as a failure in some way of the system. You could also look at it as perhaps our system is catching cases of child abuse and neglect more often. So perhaps, you know, it's not necessarily a failure. Perhaps, you know, we have a more effective system at identifying abuse and neglect. I would say that, you know, I've been out of child and family services for several years now, but I know that, you know, the rising use of methamphetamine was certainly playing an active role in how many children were being removed. And many, if not the majority of the cases that I was involved in, certainly were linked to some sort of substance abuse issues. And so, you know, if I'm going to take a stab at it, I would say perhaps we are lacking in substance abuse treatment programs. Perhaps, you know, I don't know what the statistics are for drug use in Montana as compared to the rest of the nation, but that might be something to look into.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I immediately that's kind of where I go. I know that recently speaking to some CPS workers and looking over new policies that have been put into effect since I've been directly working with the department, I do see this sort of move towards prevention from removal. So I think working to find resources for the family when they initially get a report or see that there is a problem. And I think definitely the department trying to find ways to support that family in any way they can before removing a child. So I know those are fairly new. And so, you know, perhaps that will have an impact as well as to how many kids are out of home.
Okay. Well, in 2018, 3.6 million was cut from the CFS budget. What kind of problems did that create?
I mean, I think that it's monumental, right? And so that's like an ongoing problem in terms of being able to provide services. I mean, in so many different ways, right? So you're looking at having enough workers to begin with. I mean, that was huge when I was there, and I know it continues to be an issue when you don't have enough workers in your office or you're not paying people enough to stay in that really, really hard job. You have workers that are there that are, you know, worn out. They have too many people on their caseloads. Perhaps they don't have the resources that they need to get to all of the reports that they're supposed to go to be able to give the amount of time and energy that they might need to on legal cases. And so, I mean, I think, one of the biggest things that I see being kind of an issue in child and family services is the ability for workers to practice self-care and to have a job that is doable, reasonably doable based on sort of the caseload that's coming in. A lot of times now, me being in private practice, CFS will be asked to pay for services if a client doesn't have insurance or doesn't have a way to pay for therapy, for instance. And so I know that there is quite a bit of money probably going out for that. In-home services, individual therapy, parenting classes, all of those things. And so as money continues to decrease for those resources as well, I'm sure that that has an effect on the families and their ability to reunify with their children.
Yeah. So there's not enough money to hire enough caseworkers. So the caseworkers they do have are overloaded, and they end up quitting because they can't handle it. And so it's just a vicious cycle that never ends.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at, you have workers that are there that have been there for a period of time, have learned the job, and then they're leaving because they can go do a different job that isn't as overwhelming, because it's a very, very hard job. I mean, I don't think that's a secret to anyone. And they can find something else that maybe pays similarly, or that isn't taking as much from them. So when a worker quits, a seasoned worker or a worker that, has finally gotten trained up, even if you can hire another worker, it is a period of time before they're trained up and able to know it, to do their job effectively. Yeah. And that is, I mean, they have, several weeks of training that they need to do. And then just the experience that comes with having done the job for a while. It puts a strain on the supervisors who are then, having to cover for that. I mean, it's just, you're right, it's a vicious cycle, and it just I think it trickles down.
Mm-hmm. I read somewhere that the turnover for CPS workers is 35%. Does that sound about right?
I mean, I personally feel like it might depend on area too. I felt like it was higher than that, but certainly very high. Yes.
Yeah. Montana spends 5% on funds for preventative services, as compared to 29% by other states. Do you think this is a policy that should be changed?
100%. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I even see, this isn't specifically a child and family services policy, but just even sort of how society looks at training up new parents, right? We all know that you get offered Lamaze when you go to have a baby, right? And that's pretty typical for someone to take that. But I don't know of, at least in Montana, anyone that says, let's offer you this parenting class before you have, your child as well, right? And so I think that, there's a list of really effective parenting courses and support out there that I just think aren't being offered until someone's having a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think that CFS is, based on some of their changes to policy, is working on some of that preventative piece. When a report comes in, I know that they've hired a new employee, at least in the Missoula office, that's their job, is to, in a very timely manner, I think it's within 7 days or something of CFS intervention, checking out what's going on with the family, assessing what they might need, and then offering, a load of services to them that could be helpful to keep their kids in their care or to get their kids back into their care as soon as possible. And I'm a big supporter of that. I do think that anytime a kiddo is removed from their family, it's that in itself is a trauma, whether it was an abusive environment or not. That's a significant thing to have happen in your life. And so even just being aware of that and offering services immediately to that child could be impactful in how they do years down the road.
Yeah. Many parents struggle to regain custody of their children because they can't find a safe and affordable place to live. And it's being said that housing might actually be a big issue in foster care problem. Some think that better housing options will reduce kids having to go into foster care. Do you think there's any truth to that?
I mean, yeah, that would make sense. I'm sure that's a part of it. There are a lot of homeless families in Missoula, and historically there are programs that help, but those run out of funding eventually,
Yeah.
right? And there aren't, as far as I know, other than, well, now there's Family Promise. But in terms of, the Poverello Center, children aren't allowed to go there. There's some shelters for moms and their children, but dads aren't allowed, right? And, Family Promise can only do so much. So I certainly think that could definitely be a piece of this. Housing is a big problem in Missoula anyway, without a doubt.
Okay. Another issue is, why aren't more people interested in being foster parents? There's 4,000 foster kids in Montana and only a fraction of the amount of homes needed to house them.
Yeah, I mean, I that's a great question. When I worked with Dan Fox, aside from doing family therapy and individual therapy there, one of our other tasks was to train up therapeutic foster families, and to place kids that maybe were at a higher need with families. And it was sparse in terms of getting new folks to come in and sign up to provide that service. I think that there's a couple things. I think there's misconceptions on what that might look like or feel like, right? There, in terms of, I think sometimes you hear horror stories maybe about kids in foster care, and there are those experiences where it's been really hard for families. I feel like sometimes that has to do with not having the support that they need in place soon enough. In order to really care for that whatever child, or know how to care for that child in the way that they need. I also think that it's a huge commitment to bring a child into your home, right? And I think that some people are worried about whether or not they would have the time, energy to be able to do that, right? Yeah, and I think the amount that foster parents are getting paid to support children is not always adequate. It's the bare bones to cover the minimum. I think there's a lot of money that comes out of pocket as well. So some people might feel like they can't afford it, and maybe they really can't. Maybe they don't have the space. Maybe they're worried about the impact it will have on the children that are in their home. It's a huge commitment. And my thought is that if you are choosing to go into the foster care system, there are, respite homes, and, you can ask to be a temporary placement, but a lot of times you might even be making a lifetime commitment. At least that's the hope. And I think that's, a really big decision that a lot of people don't take lightly.
Yeah.
I know maybe there could be a little bit more outreach around what that consists of.
Yeah. And my own experience as a foster parent did not make me feel appreciated by CPS or CFS. And I wonder if that all comes back to the CPS worker is just overloaded and could not give me the support that I needed.
I mean, yeah, if you think about, I don't know what the cutoff, or if there even is one right now, in terms of how many legal cases an ongoing worker might have here in Missoula, for instance. But, if you're spending 4 hours on the phone every other day or something on a particularly difficult case, because there are many of those, it just doesn't add up, right? And so there's certainly, in terms of how much time you have, even if you have 10 cases, there's not enough time. And I think that workers are spending more than that oftentimes. And so I think the foster parents, are the ones that maybe are not always in crisis until they are, right? And so a lot of times their needs do go to the wayside a little bit. There's also many times where CFS is getting a kiddo into their care on an emergency basis, and they don't fully understand what all the needs of the child are. And they just know they need to get the kiddo somewhere safe.
Yeah.
And so sometimes foster parents are taking in kids that they don't even have a lot of information about. Nobody has the information.
Yeah.
Purely because the kiddos need to go somewhere. Again, I think, I personally think that if a child is in foster care, there should be therapeutic services set up, period. Like every single family, every single time. And, if they end up not needing it, then great. But I think that's better than waiting to see if they do need it and then not having it there, right? Or things have already gotten so hard that foster parents are burnt out and ready to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work that could be done in that area.
It kind of feels like everything comes back to money in the end. Does it seem that way?
Money and resources. I mean, I have a waiting list for services right now, and I know that many of my cohorts do as well, most. And so, there's that piece too, is, are there enough services here to meet the need, right? And it's, I think Missoula is inundated with therapists, with having a couple social work programs here, and it's wonderful, but we're busy, and it's really big. And I know that sometimes some of the time spent on the phone for workers is just calling around trying to find somebody who can take another client. So money and resources.
If you could pinpoint one or two policies that would improve the situation, what would they be?
I guess policies that are currently in place.
Or maybe different policies.
The policies that don't exist.
Yeah.
I have always had this dream of a foster care option that included the whole family. And so where somebody takes in a family rather than just kids and supports the family all together. Yeah. Which I know is really complicated and would be, yes, complicated in so many ways. But I do think if you can keep the family in the times where you can keep the family together in a safe space with supervision, I mean, why not, right? Could there be family group homes where the family is being supported at all times with lots of safety resources in place?
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it's a really big idea that certainly would have lots of challenges, but I do think kids should be with their parents when safely possible. So what else could we do to keep them with their parents?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I also, on the other end of things, there's the 15 out of 22 month rule. I don't know if you know about that, but so anytime a child is out of their, so basically a parent has, out of any 22-month period, they have 15 months to complete their treatment plan or to be making adequate progress.
Okay.
Before the department would need to find a different permanency option rather than reunification. So the department could ask for termination of rights or ask the parent to relinquish rights at that point if that amount of time has occurred. For me, I work with parents and kids, and I do think that breaking that up a little bit, I do see several parents who just don't make progress in the first 6 to 8 months, and the kids are just getting kind of strung along, and I see how hard that is on kids. And so I think being able to say, something to the extent of after 6 months or 8 months, where are we at and are we making progress? Because it takes an incredible toll on kids of all ages when they are being strung along for 15 months, which is a long time in a little kid's life.
Yeah.
When we do have parents that just kind of that aren't making progress.
Right.
So I do think kind of a push for progress, like, let's get things going now, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
this is where we expect you to be within this amount of time.
Okay.
Could be helpful. Yeah.
Well, I think we're out of time, but
Okay.
I really appreciate all of your thoughts and information, and I've learned a few things. So thank you so much. And
Absolutely.
I hope you have a fantastic Thanksgiving.
Thanks. You too.
See you later.
See you, Diana. Bye-bye.
Bye.